All right, folks, so in today's video, we're gonna be doing an extremely detailed review and comparison of the Zero Compromise ZC527 versus the Nightforce 5-25 ATACR. Both of these are extremely high-end, top-tier optics, but this one's even more expensive than this one. The question is it worth it? We're gonna get into that, and you can make that decision on your own. Hey folks, Gary here with Paramount Tactical Solutions. So today we're gonna nerd out on optics. We're gonna have a lot of fun with this. We're gonna get deep into the technical specs. And I can tell you right now, if you're looking for a short video on either one of these, this isn't it. I think it's really important to prioritize the information over brevity. With that being said, I wanna be respectful of your time. So if you're watching this on YouTube, down below there will be chapter markers that you can access down there, and you can jump to the areas that you want to jump to. If you're watching this on Rumble, I will have the chapter markers and the timestamps down in the description below, so you can jump right to that. Hey folks, sorry to interrupt, but that guy's lying to you. Actually, what I decided to do was just take a different approach. Folks, I'm back there editing this video, and I've shot a bunch of additional footage to put in the video to make sure it's as complete, fair, and just transparent as possible. And the video just ended up being much longer than I anticipated. I started looking at possibly just editing it down and cutting out just down to the bare bone minimum, but I felt like I was starting to compromise the integrity of the information. And, you know, again, these are expensive optics. You know, I recommend either one of these, which by the way, if you decide to buy either one of these, we'd really appreciate it if you purchase through us. It really does help us, helps the channel, and nobody else is bringing you the level of information so that you can make good purchasing decisions like we are. So if you chose us to purchase through, we really appreciate that. So if you are gonna end up purchasing either one of these, you know, these are investments, and I don't want you to make the wrong decision based on me editing down a video or getting rid of information that could have been important to you. So I'd rather release too much information than not enough. That's really what it comes down to. So that's what I'm gonna do, folks. I'm gonna release this review in a series of videos, and on every single one of those thumbnails, I'm gonna list the topics that we're gonna cover in that particular video. That way you can pick the ones you wanna watch and then not watch the ones that really don't interest you. But I think when we're talking about optics that cost as much as these do, I think more information is better than not enough. And I just feel like that's my responsibility to deliver to you. So again, just cutting out a bunch of information to make a nice little 20-minute YouTube video isn't the right option, at least not for me. But anyways, I'm gonna let you guys get back to the younger, more handsome version of me. So enjoy the video. If you just want the Consumer Reports Cliff Notes version of this, you can jump to the very end where I will provide a detailed summary, and I will give ratings in many different performance areas on these optics, as well as a rating overall. So if that's all you want, jump to the end, feel free to do that, and you can skip all the rest. But if you're looking at purchasing either one of these, I would suggest that you stick with us. If you'd like to know more about optics, stick with us, because I'm gonna go through all of the technical specs of this. I'm gonna compare the physical features of these, and you're gonna know a lot more about optics in general, even if these two optics aren't on your radar. Now, I know a lot of folks out there probably have never even heard of Zero Compromise, or you've heard of it, but you're not really familiar with them. And that's why I think when we're reviewing an optic, one of the best things that we can do is compare it to kind of a known entity. And the Nightforce ATACR line, period, folks, they've kind of set the standard out there as far as durability, tracking, optical clarity. Nightforce has a reputation on the market, and they have earned that, and we'll talk more about that as well. Now, a couple disclaimers. Number one, I actually started this review in January of 2023. I originally intended this video to be like, I don't know, maybe a week-long review. We've gone far beyond that. Obviously, we have about 11 months of experience with this optic. I have probably 2.5, 3 years of experience with this optic. So I have lots of information and lots of video to share with you. Now, back in January, when I shot an introduction to this video, I threw out a disclaimer, and that disclaimer was, hey folks, we are a Nightforce dealer. I think it's important that you know that if we have a vested interest in a product that we are reviewing or comparing anything else to. Now, the other thing that I talked about at the time was the fact that we were gonna use that review period to determine whether or not we wanted to become a Zero Compromise dealer. Well, folks, that time has come and gone. We've been a Zero Compromise dealer for many months now. So yes, we are a dealer for both of these optics, and I think that's important for you to know. But what you also need to know is, number one, we only carry items that we personally have tested and we believe in and we're passionate about. But number two, I am never going to violate our integrity to sell you something. That's not what this channel is about. And that is a very short-term strategy, right? Our number one commodity is our integrity and our experience. So we want this channel to be the place that you go to for good information, for good advice. We want you to come to our business for good customer service and for training. That's really what it's about. So with all that being said, let's get hard and heavy into this and let's have some fun with it. All right, folks, so the first thing I want to do is kind of compare and contrast the different physical features of these, kind of go over them from front to back, tell you what I like, what I don't like about those. And let's start off with the Nightforce. So this is the ATACR 5-25. It's a 5-25 power first focal plane optic. And Nightforce for many years, I personally have been using Nightforce for almost 20 years. And Nightforce has always set the standard both in, build quality, fit and finish, durability, tracking, glass quality. Folks, again, it's one of those things, when you open up a Nightforce box, at least in my mind, still to this day, I open that box and it's like, oh.
Is that what I think it is? Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
Nightforce is known for setting the standard when it comes to quality, period. It really does come down to that. It's one of the most used optics in the U.S. military, especially in special operations. There were some other ones that we had access to, and one thing that I can tell you from personal experience on this is the durability of these has always been almost legendary. I've literally seen heavy rifles fall off the back of a Humvee with this optic on it fall down. I've seen them literally roll down and hit rocks on the side of a mountain. And every time when something that I thought was catastrophic happened to this optic, I've taken that optic, that rifle, and I went and tested the zero. It remained zeroed. Everything functioned on it. So when it comes to durability, in my mind, they're really hard to beat. As well as the glass quality on these and tracking. Every single tracking test that I've ever done on a Nightforce has been perfect. Now, I have heard of other folks having different experiences on that, and of course, anything that's mass produced, you can't have problems with. So I get it. There are different experiences out there, but I also know the stringent quality control process that Nightforce goes through before they reach market, and Nightforce does a really good job identifying and taking care of bad optics before they leave. So I love Nightforce. I have for a really long time, and I always will. I think they are a really good benchmark for almost every other optic. There are better optics out there in many different areas, but I think as a complete package, Nightforce is really hard to beat. With that being said, they're not cheap. So I do want to cover some of the different physical features of this, make you aware of that if you're thinking about buying this optic. I'll give you some reasons why you should, kind of already have. But on top of that, I'll also give you some food for thought as far as some things that I see as a negative on these optics overall. All right, folks, so the first thing I want to cover is fit and finish and build quality. When you get a Nightforce, you know exactly what you're getting. You always get, and again, to me, they've always set the standard when it comes to fit and finish and build quality, especially on the ATACR line, and we'll go through some of the different features. The other thing I want to talk about that is specific to comparing these two is the accessories that you're going to get with the ATACR line. This is not the case necessarily with the NX8 or the NXS, but with the ATACR, you are going to get front and rear lens covers, and these are Tenebrex, very nice. They're Tenebrex, really good. The other thing that you're going to get with the ATACR is you're going to get this really well-made throw lever, and it actually screws in. It's threaded, and you just tighten that thing down inside there, and it is an extremely good throw lever. I like the way that it integrates into your magnification ring, and it really makes things easy when it comes to, and I just wish everybody did that. I wish it was integrated right into that throw ring, and you'd be good to go. The other thing that you do get with the ATACR is you do get a sunshade, and that's important to note as well. I don't often use this, but it's nice to have, and I keep it in my case, and I'm ready to use it if I'm shooting in conditions where a sunshade is going to benefit me. So you do get those accessories. And of course, you get the normal things in the box, lens cloth, you get some bikini covers, some stickers, and owner's manual, things like that. Now let's talk about the different features of this. What I love, and then I'll talk about some of the things that I don't really like so much. So there are things that I would like to see improved on the Nightforce overall. So one of the things I've always loved about Nightforce is the windage and the elevation turrets. Folks, these are extremely nice positive clicks. You know exactly, you can feel them. They feel really good, especially on the elevation. We have nice clicks. See if you can hear that. They're audible, they're tactile, they work really well. And you know, I don't like clicks that are overly loud. One of the things that kind of irritates me actually on the Arken, if you haven't seen that review, I did a review on the Arken, I compared it to this optic, and I talked about that in that review, is that they're too loud. It's almost ridiculously loud and almost artificial sounding and feeling. I want to be able to hear it, but I don't want someone 100 yards from me to hear me adjusting an optic either. And I think that Nightforce has always found the perfect balance on that. I really do like the feel of the parallax knob. There's some tension there, but it's easy to adjust, and you can make extremely fine adjustments dialing in that parallax. One of my favorite features on the ATACR line is the fact that we have a push button illuminated reticle, right? So we just push that button. I believe there's 5 levels of red, and then you also get like 5 levels of green. Don't quote me on that, but I also like the fact that after a while, to save batteries, that will time out and it will turn off. So that's a really good feature as well. Other than that, when it comes to the usability, the functionality, the fit and finish, and the durability, again, in my mind, Nightforce always sets the standards. Now let's talk about just a couple of things that I don't like. All right, so going back here, one of the things that I have never really liked about Nightforce is the diopter adjustment. If you're not familiar with this, it's one of my least favorite ways to adjust a diopter. We have this entire piece back here, and then we have this locking ring. So to adjust the diopter, you back off this locking ring just a little bit, and then you make your adjustments right here. You gotta kind of hold this all steady and still. You make your diopter adjustment, and then once you get it dialed in, you tighten this ring down. Not the worst thing in the world, but also not the most easy or elegant thing I've ever seen. I would have thought that after all this time that, you know, Nightforce would have come up with a little bit better of a system. The other thing that I've never really liked, or I thought that could be vastly improved, is the amount of tension that you always get on a Nightforce with the magnification throw. Folks, there is a lot of tension. This throw lever is required. It really is, to have the leverage that you need to be able to adjust your magnification. It's probably twice as much tension or, you know, stiffness as I would like. I would like to see that about half as much, and you know, it is what it is. That's something they can improve on. I think it would just make this a little bit more of a refined product. The other thing that I've always wanted to see improved on the Nightforce is when you're changing magnification, your entire ocular lens housing is moving with you. I've never liked that. You know, I don't like the fact that now as I'm changing magnification, I have my lens cover moving. Is it a big deal? No, it's not a big deal. And by the way, folks, most people don't know this, because as this is moving, sometimes it gets in your way, and people think that you have to like loosen this entire thing, right? You have to loosen this entire thing to get this to move. Actually, the rear lens cover moves independently of that, and a lot of people don't realize that. I see students on our firing line messing around with this whole thing. I'm like, hey man, you know, you can move this independently. Again, a lot of people just don't realize that. And the first time when you first move this, it is very stiff. It almost feels like you're breaking it. So you can move that out of the way. Is it a big deal? No, it's not a big deal, but I would prefer if this whole thing didn't move. And I would prefer if that, you know, tension was a lot less. It would move a little bit smoother. All right, so let's talk about the other thing that has kind of bothered me, and it's been kind of a big deal to me when it comes to the ATACR line, is the fact that we don't have locking turrets with neither windage or elevation. Especially with windage, I would like to see at a minimum a locking turret on that. Now this does come with a turret cap that you can screw on there, and then you have to uncap it to make your adjustments. I've long taken that off. I want to be able to make the adjustments when I want to make the adjustments. And then I have a beauty ring that they include that covers up those threads so you don't damage those threads. And this is just how I run my optic. But you know, not so much while you're shooting, But if you're moving your gun around, if you're walking through the woods, doing any sort of movement, these can and do get bumped and moved. And next thing you know, you need to shoot, you get down and your windage or your elevation knob has changed and you may or may not realize it. Hopefully you catch it, hopefully you're paying attention. But more than once, I've seen many shooters where they accidentally bumped the windage or the elevation and it wasn't on the setting that they thought it was. So that's another area of improvement. But folks, at the end of the day, those are minor inconveniences. That's what those really are. And honestly, a lot of those are just personal preferences. Nothing that really detracts from the overall functionality, the tracking capabilities of these. I mean, they just have always done a good job with the internals on this. The tracking is very precise. It's very rare that I see a Nightforce that is not tracking 100%. It does happen, but it is very rare when it's very common in most other optics. All right, so now let's talk about the new kid on the block and slightly more expensive kid on the block for sure, and that's a Zero Compromise ZC527. So this is a 5-27 first focal plane optic versus a 5-25 on the Nightforce ATACR. So you are getting additional magnification out of this, but there's actually more to it than that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But folks, one of the first things you're gonna notice when you open this up and pull this out, all those things that I said about the fit and finish, when it comes to the Nightforce, folks, you get every bit of that and a lot more when it comes to the Zero Compromise. I'm telling you, that's one of the first things that you'll notice if you had both of these in your hand side by side. The finish on this, just the overall refinement of some of these features that we're gonna get into, it is just, man, it's just a really well executed optic. Everything physically about this optic looks good, it feels good. It has a kind of a softer finish than the Nightforce, and there's more to it than that we'll get into. But one thing I think is important to cover is the accessories that you get or don't get with this optic compared to the Nightforce, because these are fairly similarly priced. I mean, there's probably 500 or so difference. Both of these are Ferraris when it comes to the optics world. Both of these are top tier optics. So there may be some small things that make a difference to you, whether you're gonna buy one over the other. But when it comes to accessories, you don't get really any accessories with the Zero Compromise. If you want a sunshade, folks, you gotta pay extra for the sunshade. If you want lens caps, you gotta pay extra for those lens caps, and you need to know that going in. But let's talk about some of the things that I really do like about this optic. So first of all, when we look back here, number one, I'll just pull this off just for illustration purposes, but we have this is also a Tenebrex lens cover. Right here we have our diopter adjust. And folks, notice it's super easy to do. You can actually do it with the lens cover on as well, but I just want to show you that you can adjust this very quickly, very easily, to making sure that your reticle is crisp and clear. There's no one doing any sort of locking ring or anything like that. Also, as I adjust this, you'll know that this entire ocular housing isn't moving around. So when I adjust my lens cover and I want it right in this position and I want it to stay there, it's going to stay in that position. So that's really important to know. The other thing, folks, I absolutely love the way this magnification, how smooth it is. Folks, it is just extremely smooth. There's probably about half to a quarter the amount of tension on this one that there is on the magnification ring on the Nightforce. So it's extremely smooth, very easy to adjust. It just feels a little bit more refined. The materials on this, the way that this is finished, also just feels and looks a little bit more refined. Now, let's talk about one of my major pet peeves, folks, on the Nightforce, besides the spec here and those minor inconveniences. Folks, we absolutely have locking turrets. And again, I know some people actually don't prefer locking turrets. I don't know why, but there are some people out there that will prefer non-locking turrets. I like locking turrets. That way, again, while I'm shooting, I'm gonna leave these unlocked so I can make any adjustments that I need to. But one of the first things that I'm doing before I'm moving or I'm done shooting or I plan on doing any sort of movement with my gun is, number one, I'm gonna make sure it's going back to zero or whatever I want it to be on, and I'm locking that down. And the same thing with the windage. Folks, I have always thought that when it came to the way that an optic is supposed to feel as you adjust any elevation or windage, I thought Nightforce set the standard on that. Folks, this is just a little bit nicer, I'm telling you. If you were feeling both of these side by side, I gotta be honest with you, I like the way that these feel. I like the sound that these make. They're just a little bit more crisp and a little bit more refined. I think that's kind of really what it comes down to. It's just a little bit better. When you start using the elevation and windage knobs on this starts to feel almost a little mushy. And I've never, felt that way before. These really do, they just feel a little bit better. And that's subjective, and that's my opinion on that. But I really do think these feel better. It is very distinct, very crisp, very easy to move, very easy to stop where you want to stop. It's just exactly how elevation and windage turrets are supposed to feel. One thing that you'll notice right away, just whether you're just visually looking at them or actually touching them, is that the main tube body on the Zero Compromise is a 36 millimeter tube. Folks, normally when you're adding size to an erector tube housing, the main tube body of this, going from a 30 to a 34 millimeter tube body size, all they're doing is adding additional room so that erector tube can move, so they can add elevation and windage mechanically, right? So that there's more room for that lens to move up and down. One of the things that stood out to me right away was the fact that we have a 36 millimeter tube body over here and a 34 millimeter tube body over here, but yet both of these have the exact same amount of mechanical elevation built into these, right? So we have the same amount of travel available with both of these, so why is this tube so much larger? So I actually asked Zero Compromise that, and they came back to me and they said some things about lenses, and basically what it comes down to, folks, that they sort of alluded to was the fact that we're getting larger erector tube lenses in this. So that will aid in additional light reaching from the objective lens to the ocular lens. Now, it always gets a little weird. If you deal with optic companies in general, folks, you'll see that they are very hesitant to give you any sort of real technical specs that aren't already listed. They consider that stuff proprietary. So take that for what it is, and I will tell you, just based on my own experience, we are definitely getting some sort of advantage of light transmission on this optic, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So right here we have the parallax adjust knob. Very smooth, very easy to use. One of the biggest difference that we have with this versus the Nightforce is that we have a minimum parallax of 25 meters or 27 yards versus 75 yards on the Nightforce. So this will allow you to focus much closer than the Nightforce. So especially if you're doing any sort of rimfire and some of those closer targets, this might be a major consideration for you. I know a lot of folks are using the Zero Compromise for that very reason, for rimfire, so that's something to consider. But this knob is super easy to adjust. There's a slightly more tension on this one versus the Nightforce. I mean, it's very slight. Again, it's still super smooth, still easy to adjust, great parallax. I will also say, just from my personal experience, this seems to be more, I never go off the markings on our parallax anyhow. I adjust until I have a very clear, crisp image. And I've always found that at 100 yards, I need to be around what I would consider, there's not even a marking for it, but like 90 yards on the Nightforce. This has always been extremely accurate, but don't look at your parallax numbers on there anyhow. Make sure you guys are just looking through the image and adjusting parallax off of what you're seeing, not off of some markings on the dial. That doesn't make sense. So overall, great parallax, works, functions perfectly. Just on the outside of the parallax, we have our illumination knob. And folks, I'm just gonna tell you right now, the illumination on this reticle, on this optic, is by far the best I have ever seen. It illuminates the entire reticle. There are no hot spots. There's no faded illumination like you see on some of a fully illuminated reticle. It is by far the best reticle that I've ever seen. It is almost daylight visible. One of the things I found, folks, even in full daylight brightness, is if I have this reticle on, I can see that reticle very clearly in the shadows. If I'm up against a dark background where normally your reticle would fade off into that, you can turn that reticle on. Even in daylight bright, you're going to see that in the shadows. Or up against, it's going to contrast up against dark, even a dark target. or a target in a darkened area. So this by far is my favorite reticle that I've ever seen on a long range optic. So, but take that for what it's worth. I will show you some images of that and you can make that determination if you agree with me or not. Folks, one of the things I forgot to mention, it's, you know, one of those small things that I think is actually really important and really nice feature is that as in the windage and the elevation turrets, we have small little arrows that are pointing to where those set screws are. You guys have been out there in the field, you zeroed your gun, you're trying to find those things, you're looking all around for them. It's really nice. I can look on the side of this real quick. I can see where those set screws are indexed and we can, you know, do what we need to do. Same thing that we have right here on the elevation. You see an arrow there, and that is where those set screws are. The other thing that I would add is I like how these turrets are laid out. I like the fact that they're a little bit wider than most. So take that in consideration, but then we also have, just like the Nightforce to some extent, we have additional markings that indicate if you're on the second or third revolution. So if you're on the second revolution, you have, you know, those additional markings above the bottom ones, but then right here on the top, again, it goes all the way up to 35 on the top. So you can actually see where you're going if you need to dial that many revolutions, but that is a lot of elevation for sure. But it is nice to have those markings there so you're not getting lost in the sauce. And I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but folks, this does have a zero stop as well. And I actually have mine set to where it will go down to like, I think 0.7 negative. I always like to build in some negative elevation below my zero stop, so if I need to go lower, I can. All right, so I think that pretty much covers the main features of our overall optic.